Working for a gigantic soulless corporation might be bad, but the next time you want to complain about your job, just think about this. At least you're not an ornamental hermit. And hey, I'm not saying that people who were employed as ornamental hermits all disliked it, or they didn't enjoy it, or didn't enjoy the benefits, or that it was a bad job. I have no idea. But just consider this. I saw this the other day and I thought it was super interesting. So I wanted to share it with you because I didn't know about it before. And I don't know if you've heard about this before. So let's talk about it for a second. So this is from Wikipedia, and they talk about the noble garden hermit. And so this says that garden hermits or ornamental hermits were hermits encouraged to live in purpose built hermitages, follies, grottos, or rockeries on the estates of wealthy landowners, primarily during the 18th century, and I guess 18th and 19th century in Great Britain as well. Such hermits would be encouraged to dress like druids and remain permanently on site where they could be fed, cared for, and consulted for advice or viewed for entertainment. So basically, rich, wealthy landowning people could create an environment for a person to live in and then basically kind of like provide for them as a way for them to live there as kind of like not a pet necessarily, but something like that. Basically, for the entertainment of that person and the guests that they have on their land at their house. And so it was basically, I wouldn't say this person would be a servant per se, but they were kind of like part of the decoration of the landscape, which I think is really interesting to consider a human being just kind of being part of the scenery and having so much wealth compared to other people that you could afford to have human beings as part of the landscaping of your property. And I'm not sure how well that would fly today, but back then it seems like it was a thing. So let's read a little bit about the noble garden hermit. So this says history. Professor Gordon Campbell of the University of Leicester suggests that Francis of Paola was among the first of the trend, living as a hermit in the early 15th century in a cave on his own father's estate. He later served as a confidant and advisor to King Charles VIII. Thereafter, throughout France, estates of dukes and other lords often included small chapels or other buildings where a resident religious hermit could remain in attendance. So maybe it was also kind of patronage to the church as well to allow a religious person to live on your property. So maybe it wasn't just for entertainment, for example. According to Campbell, the first estate with a well-known hermitage, which included a small house, chapel, and garden, was Château de Gaillon, renovated by Charles Cardinal de Bourbon during the 16th century. This also says that garden hermits became popular with the British aristocracy during the 18th and early 19th centuries. Contemporary accounts suggest the Weld family kept an ornamental hermit in a purpose-built hermitage on the Lulworth estate in Dorset. Of equivalent novelty, the Welds also maintained a mimic fort and harbor beside an adjoining lake. Both Painshill and Hawkstone Park were said to have employed ornamental hermits as well, and the one at Painshill, hired by the Honorable Charles Hamilton for a 7-year term under strict conditions, lasted 3 weeks until he was sacked after being discovered in a local pub. So apparently at least one of these garden hermits was fired from his job as well. And it says that the trend continued through the 1830s when the idea became less popular as estate landscaping concepts evolved. And so the concept behind garden hermits, even in the 18th and 19th centuries, garden hermits were novelties and eccentricities. So it wasn't like everyone was having it. Grottos had become more popular during the 18th century as a place to withdraw for meditation, relaxation, and reflection. So garden hermits were living in the grotto. I don't know if anyone gets that, but whatever. I'm a nerd. And this is where those grottos kind of get repurposed for garden hermits. So with an increased focus on industrialism and production, contemplative garden meditation was viewed by some as an extravagance. So wealthy people had these grottos. They were for their own meditation at first. And then when industrialization kind of started happening more and more, that was looked at as kind of an extravagance or an indulgence that they didn't have time for anymore. So they had these grottos already. And so instead of them meditating there, they kind of hired a person to live in that area, take care of it, and be entertainment for them, and possibly even give them advice on different things. So I think this is really interesting how they kind of repurposed those grottos and then eventually started putting garden hermits there as well. So, with the lack of personal free time that this industrialization brought, in combination with an increase in disposable income, so they had even more money, the popularity of natural garden landscaping and the rise of neoclassical culture established an environment in which the idea of garden hermits as novelty guests became popular. So it's kind of a show of wealth that you have one of these people living on your land, and it's a way to kind of show off your wealth and use that grotto that you had before for meditation that you don't have time for anymore. And this says that in some early instances, hermits were simply represented or hinted at rather than personified. Outside a folly or a grotto, a small table and chair, reading glasses, and classical text might be placed, suggesting that it was where a hermit lived. And later, suggestions of hermits were replaced with actual hermits. So now to be cool, you have to actually have a hermit living there. Men hired for the sole purpose of inhabiting a small structure and functioning as any other garden ornament. So these were human garden ornaments. Now we have garden gnomes that are not human, that we put in our gardens. Back then, they had actual humans that were garden ornaments, just like any other ornament you put in your garden. I think that's interesting, and I think we've progressed a little bit since then, which is good. Hermits would sometimes be asked to make themselves available to guests, answering questions and providing counsel. In some cases, the hermits would not communicate with visitors, functioning instead like a perpetual stage play or live diorama. So it wasn't the same exact job everywhere. In some cases, they were invited to interact with guests, and in other places, they were kind of putting on a performance for guests. And in return for their services in residence, hermits would generally receive a stipend in addition to room and board. So I have no idea if these hermits enjoyed their jobs or not. I haven't asked any of them. Maybe they liked it, maybe they hated it. I have no idea what their actual personal experience was like. I'm sure it was different for each individual garden hermit. But before recently, I didn't know this was a thing, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. So I wanted to bring this up and share it with you. If you want, feel free to tell me how you feel about it in the comments. And either way, whether you decide to keep hanging out with me in the future or not, I'm Jim Wolf, and I hope you at least enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you later.